She only opened her friend's old diary to be kind, but the secrets inside were worth killing for. This is Agatha Raisin and the Diary of Mrs. Bloxby. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Carsely, on a Tuesday morning, had achieved that dangerous state known as tranquility. The air was mild, the hedgerows damp with last night's drizzle, and the postman was whistling, all of which put Agatha Raisin in an exceedingly bad mood. Peace, she thought darkly, was a personal affront. It meant everyone else was happy, and she wasn't. She stood at her kitchen window, a mug of strong coffee in one hand, watching Hodge the cat stretch on the windowsill as though modelling indifference. "You've the right idea," she muttered. "Sleep all day and let someone else pay the bills." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. Agatha sighed, flicking ash into the sink. The last real excitement in Carsely had been Doris Simpson's argument with the milkman about whether semi-skimmed counted as diet. Since then, the village had lapsed into the smug serenity she found intolerable. By 10 o'clock, she had reorganized the freezer, scolded herself for owning 6 bags of frozen peas, and phoned the hairdresser in Evesham to complain about the lack of appointments for people who actually matter. When even that failed to amuse, she decided to bully the postman. He arrived, poor soul, still whistling. "Anything interesting?" she demanded. He handed her a solitary envelope. "Water bill, Mrs. Raisin." Agatha sniffed. Typical. Nothing but demands, not even a decent threat. The postman made a tactical retreat. She was halfway through lighting another cigarette when the phone rang. "Agatha, dear," came Mrs. Bloxby's gentle voice. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Of course you are," said Agatha, "but go on." "I wondered if you'd heard about our new Women's Institute initiative, a week of reflection." "Sounds dreadful. What are you reflecting on? Each other's hats?" There was a soft chuckle. "It's meant to encourage members to keep a diary for 7 days. Our thoughts, impressions, what village life means to us. Rather uplifting, don't you think?" "Not unless you enjoy reading about mildew and sponge cake," Agatha said. "You're not writing one, surely?" There was a pause long enough to suggest confession. "Well, yes, I have been keeping one privately. It's really only for myself." Agatha sat up. "Privately? You mean it's got secrets in it?" "I suppose any diary does." "Then you'd better hide it," Agatha warned. "This village couldn't keep a confidence if it were chained in the church tower." Mrs. Bloxby laughed, that maddeningly serene little laugh that made Agatha feel coarse and cynical. "Don't worry, it's safely locked in my desk." "Good," Agatha said briskly, "because if anyone got their hands on it, there'd be no living with them. Half of Carsely probably prays for gossip more than grace." When she hung up, she felt oddly restless. The word private itched at her imagination like a mosquito bite. A diary full of Mrs. Bloxby's gentle observations. What could possibly be scandalous? Yet Agatha knew that secrets in quiet souls often ran deep. She was pouring her 3rd coffee when the kitchen door burst open. Doris Simpson stood there, breathless, her shopping bag swinging. "Have you heard, Mrs. Raisin?" "Probably not," said Agatha. "Go on, make my day." Doris leaned in, eyes bright. That diary of the vicar's wife, gone, vanished from the vicarage. She's beside herself. Agatha nearly spilt her coffee. "You're joking." "Not a word. I met her in the high street, poor dear. Said she can't find it anywhere. Of course, she told me not to repeat it, so I've only told Mabel at the post office." "Which means the whole of Carsely knows," said Agatha. "Honestly, Doris, if you ever joined the Secret Service, they'd have to issue megaphones." Doris grinned, unoffended. "Well, it's shocking, isn't it? Imagine if someone read it." Agatha's mind was already racing. She pictured the mild Mrs. Bloxby confessing private thoughts about parishioners, perhaps even about herself. What if the diary contained something more dangerous than gossip, something moral or worse, romantic? "Who do you think took it?" she asked. "Could be anyone. Lily Tranter's been sniffing around the vicarage, you know, helping with flower rotas, and that curate husband of hers always looking guilty about something." Agatha seized the opening. "Ah, so Lily Tranter. Ambitious, conniving, and apparently literate. Excellent." "Now, Mrs. Raisin," but Agatha was already moving toward the phone. "Thank you, Doris. You've been, what's the word, instrumental." By the time Doris left, she was half convinced Agatha was about to summon Scotland Yard. Agatha, of course, had no such authority, but she did have Bill Wong. She dialed the Mercester police station. "Bill, it's me." "I can hear that, Agatha," came Bill's patient voice. "What's the crisis this time? Run out of gin?" "Don't be flippant. Something's happened to Mrs. Bloxby's diary." A pause. "Her what?" "Her diary. Someone's stolen it. It could contain, well, anything. Confidences, names, possibly even motives." "Motives for what? Not another murder, I hope." "Don't be dense. Yet. But think about it. Everybody in this village has been written about, probably in detail. If it gets out, there'll be blood on the bunting." Bill chuckled. "Maybe it's just mislaid. You know Mrs. Bloxby, she wouldn't record anything malicious." "That's exactly what makes it suspicious. If she's the soul of kindness, someone else might not be. You'd better take this seriously, Bill. It could be blackmail." "Agatha," said Bill, amusement creeping in, "you have a remarkable ability to turn a missing notebook into a criminal conspiracy." "Mock all you like," she said, "but when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." After hanging up, she stalked through the cottage, energy humming. Boredom had evaporated, replaced by that delicious tingling sense of impending scandal. She opened a notebook on her own kitchen table. The first page was blank. She considered writing "Investigation into the case of the vanishing diary," but decided that sounded pompous. Instead, she wrote, "Find thief. Protect Mrs. Bloxby. Get credit." Hodge leapt onto the table and sat squarely on the notebook. "Out of the way, you third obstruction," she said, lifting him off. "Don't you understand civic duty?" He yawned, exposing small white teeth, and padded off toward his bowl. Agatha poured herself a gin, despite the early hour, and gazed out at the quiet lane. Villagers passed by, cheerful and unsuspecting. The piece of Carsely looked as solid as the Honeystone cottages, but she knew better. Underneath, resentment, jealousy, and boredom were always fermenting. It only needed a spark. And nothing ignited a village like gossip sanctified by a diary. She lit another cigarette, watching the smoke drift toward the ceiling. "So," she said aloud, "someone's nicked the vicar's wife's secrets. That's practically blasphemy." The phone rang again. Mrs. Bloxby, sounding distressed. "Oh, Agatha, I wish I hadn't mentioned it. It's probably just misplaced. Please promise you won't tell anyone." "Of course," said Agatha, crossing her fingers. "Not a word. I'm only concerned for your reputation." "That's very kind." "Kindness has nothing to do with it," said Agatha truthfully. "I simply hate incompetence. I'll keep my eyes open." When she put the receiver down, her expression was one of grim satisfaction. For the first time in weeks, life in Carsely had acquired flavour again. She stubbed out her cigarette and reached for the phone once more. "Bill," she said when he answered, "imagine if everyone's confessions were suddenly on paper. Wouldn't that make the village explode?" There was a weary sigh on the other end. "Oh no," said Bill. "You're starting another one, aren't you?" "Absolutely," said Agatha, "and this time it's personal." Hodge meowed as if to agree, or perhaps to warn her. But Agatha, smiling into the quiet, didn't hear. Outside, the drizzle thickened over Carsely, softening the cottages into ghostly shapes. Tranquility had been disturbed, and Agatha Raisin at last felt gloriously alive. Carsely woke that Wednesday with drizzle and scandal in the air. Both spread fast. By 9 o'clock, the post office queue was murmuring like a row of pigeons, and by 10, the gossip had fluttered to the Red Lion, where Agatha Raisin sat pretending to read the Daily Mail while listening to every word. The villagers were doing what they did best, speculating. "Apparently," whispered Mabel Swithins, leaning across the bar, "the vicar's wife kept a diary about everyone in the parish. Imagine, every confession, every bit of temper, written down." "She wouldn't," gasped her friend. "She would, and now it's vanished." Agatha turned a page noisily, feigning indifference. The diary was all anyone spoke of since Doris Simpson's accidental revelation. She ordered another coffee, mostly to keep the landlord from throwing her out. Her gaze flicked to the window where rain streaked the glass like punctuation marks. "Peace never lasts here," she thought with satisfaction. "They say she wrote about the WI," continued Mabel. "Something very rude about our president's Victoria Sponge." "Rude about Victoria Sponge?" the friend cried. "That's practically sedition." Agatha allowed herself a small smirk. Carsely could forgive adultery, but never a dry sponge. The door banged open, letting in a gust of damp air and Charles Fraith, tall, tanned, and insufferably relaxed. He spotted her immediately. "Agatha, my dear, still trawling the village for scandal? I thought you'd retired to embroidery." "Don't be ridiculous," said Agatha. "I'm gathering information. It's called investigation." He slid into the booth opposite her, signalling for a pint. "And what thrilling crime are we solving this week? Someone's geraniums pinched again." "Hardly. Mrs. Bloxby's diary's been stolen." That got his attention. "Mrs. Bloxby? Surely not." "Yes, and someone's been spreading rumours about what's in it." Charles's teasing smile softened. "Poor woman. She doesn't deserve that." Agatha lit a cigarette, ignoring the landlord's glare. "Exactly. Which is why I intend to find the culprit before she's humiliated." "Or before you die of curiosity," he said lightly. "Don't start," she warned. "Just promise me you won't make things worse. You've a talent for turning molehills into scandals." "This village makes its own scandals," she snapped. "I merely catalogue them." He raised his glass in mock salute. "Then may your catalogue be alphabetized by sin." Agatha gave him a look that could have scorched the wallpaper. Yet, beneath her irritation, she felt a flicker of warmth. Charles's concern, rare and brief, was oddly comforting. By the time she left the pub, drizzle had become honest rain. She trudged home, muttering at puddles, and found Hodge curled smugly on the kitchen chair. "You," she told him, shaking her umbrella, "don't know how lucky you are not to live among people." He yawned and washed a paw. She poured a gin, medicinal, and switched on her answering machine. Roy Silver's voice burst through the crackle of static. "Aggie, darling, I've just heard the most divine scandal from Doris online. Something about a missing diary? Tell me it's true." Agatha groaned. Roy's definition of privacy was something to discuss loudly in a restaurant. The message continued. "I've had a genius idea. What if we turn it into a moral awareness blog? Secrets of the Cotswolds. It'll go viral. You'll thank me later." She jabbed the stop button. "I'll thank you never." Moments later, the phone rang again. Same voice, faster this time. "Aggie, pick up. We can give it a positive spin. Rural honesty in a dishonest age. Think of the branding." Agatha snatched up the receiver. "Roy, if you publish one syllable of this, I'll throttle you with your own scarf." "Darling, calm down. I'm only helping." "You help like a fox helps chickens." "You wound me. Anyway, London's obsessed with rustic confessionals. We could—" "Goodbye, Roy." She slammed down the phone, then immediately poured another gin. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady rhythm on the window. Inside, Carsely's peace felt like a trap. Agatha paced the kitchen, cigarette in hand, brain ticking. She hated to admit it, but Charles was right about one thing. She did have a gift for enlarging trouble. Yet wasn't it her duty, as a responsible citizen and unofficial detective, to act when injustice threatened her friend? She imagined Mrs. Bloxby's gentle face, mortified by whispers about past indiscretions. The very phrase thrilled and appalled her. Mrs. Bloxby couldn't possibly have one, but what if she did? Agatha opened her notebook again and wrote, "Motive equals revenge, curiosity, boredom," then underlined boredom twice. In Carsely, it explained everything. By mid-afternoon, she could stand no more domestic silence. She put on her Mac, tucked Hodge's tail out of the door, and marched back into the drizzle. The Red Lion was busier now, the lunchtime crowd swelling with shoppers sheltering from rain. Agatha ordered a small sherry, part camouflage, part comfort, and listened anew. "They say she wrote about old Mr. Jessop's fall," someone murmured. "Fall?" "You know, off the ladder that summer. Terrible business. Rumour was he'd been drinking." "You're saying the vicar's wife wrote that down?" "That's what I heard." Agatha's ears pricked. That accident had been years ago, yet still murmured about. A fine red herring, if ever she'd heard one. Back home again, she phoned Bill Wong. "Bill, the entire village has turned criminologist. You need to do something." "About what, precisely?" "About the gossip. It's slanderous." "You're part of the gossip, Agatha." "That's different. Mine's informed speculation." He chuckled. "Look, I'll pop by tomorrow, but unless a crime's been committed—" "A theft has been committed," she reminded him. "The diary's gone." "Then let's hope whoever took it has the decency to return it." "Ha, decency's rarer than sunshine here." She hung up before he could laugh again. Evening settled. The rain thinned to mist. The village glowed under street lamps, peaceful as ever on the outside. Agatha drew the curtains, poured another gin, and told herself she wasn't thinking about Charles's warning. She was strategizing. Halfway through planning her next move, perhaps a subtle visit to the vicarage, she noticed something odd on the doormat. A folded sheet of paper, damp at the edges. No envelope, no name. She opened it. The message was typed in neat, old-fashioned letters. The diary holds more than sermons. For a moment she felt the delicious prickle of proper mystery. Someone was playing games, and if there was one thing Agatha Raisin hated, it was being left out of a game. Hodge padded in, brushing her leg. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "You'd be nosy too if you could read." He blinked, unimpressed. Agatha pinned the note to her corkboard above the kitchen table and poured herself a final gin. Outside, Carsely's cottages lay still beneath their damp, honeystone calm, unaware, or pretending not to be, that something rather intriguing had begun. She exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "So, tranquillity's finished," she said softly. "About time." Rain arrived in Carsely the way unwanted guests did, after dark and full of self-importance. The drops drummed on the slate roofs, hissed through the hedgerows, and reminded Agatha Raisin that she hadn't yet fixed the leak above her kitchen window. She glared up at the ceiling as if daring it to drip. Hodge crouched on the sill, tail wrapped neatly round himself, watching the storm with detached amusement. Agatha envied him. He didn't care about lost diaries, or anonymous notes promising hidden sins, or the smug way Charles had told her not to meddle. She poured herself a generous gin. The clock had just struck 10 when she noticed a movement beyond the window, something shifting against the dark shape of the vicarage hedge opposite. A figure in a raincoat slipped through the gate, pausing as if listening. Then it moved quickly toward the lane. "A burglar," Agatha muttered, seizing her umbrella. "In Carsely, how dare they?" She was out of the cottage before common sense caught up. The rain slapped her face. Her slippers sank into wet gravel. She hurried across the lane, heart hammering, half hoping it was a burglar so she could teach him a lesson. But by the time she reached the vicarage hedge, the figure had vanished. In its place lay a single glove, black leather, lady's size, with the neat initials LT stitched in gold. Agatha held it up like evidence in a courtroom. "Lily Tranter," she whispered. The curate's wife, too perfect by half, always organising things and simpering at the vicar. Well, well. She tucked the glove into her mac pocket and scurried home, triumphant and soaked. Hodge regarded her arrival with mild horror, tail flicking at the puddles she left on the floor. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "A clue's a clue." Morning brought watery sunshine and the smugness of sparrows. Agatha woke stiff-jointed but energised. She rang the vicarage straight away. Mrs. Bloxby answered, her voice thin with fatigue. "Agatha, dear. Oh, I meant to call you. Something dreadful has happened." "I know," said Agatha, relishing the drama. "I saw someone in your garden last night. A woman. Dropped this." She described the glove with relish. "Oh dear," murmured Mrs. Bloxby. Then it was true. The diary's gone. Agatha sat upright. "Gone? You're sure?" "I found the drawer open this morning. I'd left the key in by mistake. Foolish of me. I can't think who would want it." "I can," said Agatha briskly. "You must call the police." "Oh, I couldn't. The diary mentions people's troubles, nothing wicked but private. If it were to become public," she hesitated, "perhaps best if it were forgotten." "Forgotten? When a thief's roaming about nicking your confessions?" "Absolutely not. I'll handle it quietly." "Agatha, please don't." But the line clicked dead. Mrs. Bloxby never could stand confrontation. Agatha felt a thrilling sense of purpose. She dressed smartly, as befitted a detective of repute, navy skirt, tweed jacket, and lipstick designed to intimidate. She drove to Mercester under skies the colour of porridge. Bill Wong met her at the police canteen, mildly amused as ever. "Let me guess. You're here about the diary." "You've heard." "Half the county's heard, but Mrs. Bloxby hasn't reported anything, so officially nothing's happened." "Unofficially," Agatha said, lowering her voice, "someone broke into the vicarage. I found a glove. Belongs to Lily Tranter." Bill frowned. "That's a serious accusation." "Observation, not accusation. Her initials are on it." Could have been lost anywhere. She teaches Sunday school, probably walked through the garden. At 10 at night, in the rain. He smiled. All right, that is odd. I'll drop by discreetly. Agatha brightened. You see? We're partners again. Heaven help me, he said. By lunchtime the drizzle had returned, and so had her impatience. She decided on a reconnaissance visit to the vicarage, purely neighbourly, of course. Mrs. Bloxby greeted her with tired eyes and a pot of tea. The study door stood ajar. Papers were stacked in uneasy piles. I keep thinking I've simply mislaid it, Mrs. Bloxby said, pouring. It's silly, isn't it? One feels so violated. Agatha softened. We'll find it. Did you notice anything else missing? Only the diary. Whoever took it knew exactly where to look. Inside job, then, Agatha murmured. Someone close to the church. Possibly female. Mrs. Bloxby glanced up. Oh, Agatha, don't start hunting suspects. The world's full of misunderstandings. Yes, said Agatha, and I intend to clear them up. She sipped her tea, studying the tidy desk. A faint rectangle of dust marked where the diary had lain. The lock of the drawer was undamaged. Clearly someone had used the key. A parish key, perhaps, those dreadful things everyone copied for convenience. Her detective instinct hummed. Outside, a car door slammed. Bill Wong entered, hat dripping. Mrs. Bloxby looked alarmed. I told you not to, began Agatha. Relax, said Bill. This is just a friendly visit. Thought I'd check the scene. He examined the drawer, the window latches, the floor. No sign of forced entry, he said. Either someone had a key or you left it open. Mrs. Bloxby coloured faintly. The latter, I'm afraid. Agatha crossed her arms. Then we're dealing with opportunity and motive. Who benefits from possessing your diary? No one, said Mrs. Bloxby. There's nothing sensational in it. Just reflections, prayers, little notes about parish matters. Then why steal it? Asked Bill. Because, said Agatha, even kindness can be dangerous when written down. Bill gave her a look halfway between admiration and resignation. Promise you'll leave it to me, Agatha. Of course, she said sweetly. He left 10 minutes later, unconvinced. The afternoon sagged into evening. Agatha sat at her kitchen table, the glove laid out before her like a captured secret. She had telephoned 3 people casually to mention finding it, which meant the whole village would know by morning. She told herself this was strategy. Flush out the culprit through gossip. At 9:30, the phone rang again. Charles. You've stirred the pot, he said cheerfully. I just had Lily Tranter on the line asking why people think she burgles vicars. Because she does, said Agatha. She swears she lent her gloves to Mrs. Jessup for the fete last month. You might be accusing the wrong woman. Agatha hesitated. Did she really say that? Word for word. You're becoming Carsely's favourite topic. Good, said Agatha, though she felt a twinge of doubt. Perhaps the initials were a red herring after all. She poured another gin to drown the thought. The night deepened, the rain stopped. Hodge curled in his basket, twitching whiskers in sleep. Agatha sat up late at her typewriter, her version of a detective's weapon, trying to piece together motives. She had 3, jealousy, revenge, and boredom. The last seemed the most dangerous. At midnight, the letterbox clattered. Hodge shot upright. Agatha, startled, crossed to the door. Another envelope lay on the mat, this one crisp and dry as if delivered by hand. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet, typed on the same machine as before. Someone hid a terrible mistake after the fete. No signature, no explanation, just that ominous line. Agatha felt the prickle of real mystery now, the step beyond gossip into something darker. She looked at Hodge, who was staring solemnly back. Don't you start judging me, she told him. I didn't invent this mess. I'm merely its custodian. He blinked once, unimpressed. She pinned the new note beside the first on her corkboard, lit a final cigarette, and watched the smoke drift upward in lazy spirals. Somewhere in Carsely, someone was laughing at them all, and Agatha Raisin intended to find out who. A terrible mistake after the fete, she murmured. I'd better make a few of my own before I catch it. The rain began again, polite but persistent. Agatha poured herself a last gin and smiled. Tranquility, thank heaven, was well and truly dead. The morning drizzle had turned to that fine, floating mist peculiar to the Cotswolds, the sort that looks innocent until one discovers one's hair has become a thatch. Agatha Raisin surveyed herself in the mirror with grim determination. Leopard print scarf? Check. Lipstick loud enough to silence gossip? Double check. If Carsely was going to mutter, she intended to give it something worth muttering about. The Women's Institute meeting promised to be a battlefield disguised as a tea. Mrs. Bloxby's missing diary and the mysterious extracts had turned a village of cake bakers into a gathering of amateur sleuths and potential defendants. Agatha buttoned her trench coat, scooped up her umbrella, and announced to Hodge, "Duty calls, guard the premises, and no corpses on the doormat this time." Hodge flicked an ear, unimpressed. By the time she reached the WI hall, the place was already humming. Steam rose from kettles, the scent of scones mingled with damp wool, and the air fairly crackled with suppressed excitement. Agatha paused at the doorway like a general surveying troops. Mabel Swithins and Doris Simpson manned the tea urn, whispering furiously. The WI president, Mrs. Tibbet, stood stiff as starch, pretending calm while her cronies hovered like hens awaiting corn. Every head turned as Agatha entered. She removed her mac with theatrical slowness, revealing the leopard print in all its glory, and took a seat in the second row, close enough to observe, far enough to retreat if the scones began to fly. Mrs. Bloxby sat at the front table, pale but composed. Her hands trembled only slightly as she arranged her notes. Agatha's sharp eyes caught the flicker of sympathetic glances from some, and the thin smiles of others who considered piety a competitive sport. "Ladies," began Mrs. Bloxby gently, "let us remember that the purpose of today's meeting is fellowship." "And transparency," muttered Mrs. Tibbet darkly. A ripple of uneasy laughter ran through the room. The vicar's wife pressed on. "It seems some of my private reflections have been misunderstood. I beg you all to disregard anything you may have heard. It was never meant for public eyes." Agatha almost admired her composure. Almost. If her diary had been stolen, she would have fled the country. A voice from the back, Ellen Jessup, daughter of the late builder who had fallen from his ladder years ago, called out, "So the bit about a terrible mistake after the fate, was that misunderstood too?" The hush that followed could have buttered scones. Agatha felt every ear tilt forward. Mrs. Bloxby's smile didn't waver. "I wrote about many small mistakes, Miss Jessup. Life is full of them." Ellen sniffed. "Some mistakes cost lives." The president banged a teaspoon on a teacup. "Order! This is hardly—" But order had fled. Conversations broke out in hissing whispers. Agatha leaned toward Doris. "What's she on about?" "Oh, you know," Doris breathed. "Her father's full. People said he'd been drinking on the ladder. Terrible thing. And the diary says, no one knows, but there's talk it blames someone else entirely." Agatha's pulse quickened. Real scandal had arrived. At that moment, Lily Tranter glided in, 10 minutes late and immaculate as ever. She removed her gloves, new ones, Agatha noted sourly, and gave a sugary smile. "Sorry, darlings, parish business ran over." "How conscientious," murmured Agatha. Lily took a seat near the front, exchanging polite nods with Mrs. Bloxby. But when Mrs. Tibbet launched into the next agenda item, honesty in community life, Lily's smile froze as neatly as a trifle in a faulty freezer. Agatha didn't miss it. As speeches droned on, the undercurrent of speculation thickened. Plates clinked, spoons rattled, the village's moral backbone wobbled like jelly. Agatha drifted between groups, collecting gossip as deftly as crumbs. "If you ask me," whispered Mabel, "that curate's wife knows more than she lets on." "Or less," countered Doris. "She's all surface, that one. Like skimmed milk, looks healthy, tastes of nothing." "Maybe she's protecting the vicar," said someone else. "Protecting him from what? From whatever's in that diary." Agatha sipped her tea, letting their theories ferment. Nothing so intoxicating as moral outrage served with jam. When the meeting finally limped to an end, Mrs. Bloxby looked exhausted. Agatha helped her pack up hymn sheets. "You handled them well," she said. "If it were me, I'd have flung a scone." Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "I'm afraid anger rarely helps." "Rubbish. It's done wonders for me over the years." "You're a woman of action, Agatha. I envy that." Agatha felt unexpectedly moved. Then she remembered her mission. "By the way," she said casually, "Lily Tranter seemed rather twitchy today." Mrs. Bloxby's expression tightened. "Lily is under stress. She and her husband have financial worries." "Really? He's always bragging about his car." "Appearances deceive," said Mrs. Bloxby quietly. "Please don't judge too harshly." "Harshly? Me?" said Agatha, and nearly choked on the irony. By late afternoon the drizzle had returned, muting the Honeystone cottages to shades of melancholy. Agatha trudged home, umbrella rattling, brain alive with possibilities. Hodge greeted her at the door, tail high, as though welcoming a hero from the wars. "Don't flatter me," she said, hanging up her coat. "It's only moral combat." She had just set the kettle on when the phone rang. Doris Simpson's breathless voice tumbled down the line. "Mrs. Raisin, you'll never guess what I just saw. Lily Tranter having a right Barney with Ellen Jessup by the churchyard. Waving arms, raised voices, the lot." "What about?" "Couldn't hear, but Lily looked fit to faint, and Ellen stormed off like she'd won." Agatha's pulse quickened. "Thank you, Doris. You're an angel of information." "Don't I know it?" said Doris, pleased, and rang off to spread the tale further. Agatha stood for a moment, absorbing the picture. Lily, arguing with the daughter of the man whose terrible mistake haunted the diary. It was almost too neat, which meant it probably wasn't. Still, she could smell guilt, or at least embarrassment, and that was enough to spur her on. She poured herself a gin, switched on the lamp, and examined the 2 anonymous notes pinned above her desk. The first, "The diary holds more than sermons." The second, "Someone hid a terrible mistake after the fete." Now, a third mystery swirled in the gossip. The feud between Lily and Ellen. Perhaps Mrs. Bloxby had written something about them both, or perhaps someone merely wanted Agatha to think so. The trouble with clues, she reflected, was that they multiplied like dandelions. Later that evening she decided on a stroll to the churchyard under the pretence of fresh air. The rain had eased to drizzle again. Puddles gleamed under the lamplight. She paused by the gate, half expecting to find Lily lurking, repentant. Instead, the place lay empty except for the stone angels glistening with wet. On impulse, she circled the vicarage hedge once more. No mysterious visitors tonight, just the smell of damp leaves and a faint glow from the study window. Inside, Mrs. Bloxby bent over her desk, writing. Agatha felt a pang of protectiveness. The poor woman looked older, weighed down by guilt that likely wasn't hers. "Don't worry," Agatha murmured to the dark. "I'll dig out your truth, even if I bury my reputation doing it." Hodge would have meowed at the melodrama. Fortunately, he wasn't there to judge. Back home, she found the third envelope waiting on the mat. Plain white, typewritten label. She slit it open with a hairpin, her letter opener currently doubling as a plant stake, and drew out a single sheet. Same crisp paper, same machine. A woman of false virtue hides behind good works. From the diary of a hypocrite. Agatha read it twice. False virtue, good works. The phrase could point to half the village, or, more dangerously, to Mrs. Bloxby herself. Her stomach twisted at the thought. Surely no one would target that kind, weary woman, unless, of course, the attacker wanted maximum scandal. She pinned the new message beneath the others. 3 notes, like steps in a staircase leading somewhere unpleasant. Lighting a cigarette, she leaned back and studied them through the smoke. "If you're trying to frighten me," she said aloud, "you'll have to do better than stationery." But her tone lacked conviction. Outside, rain ticked softly against the glass like someone knocking to be let in. Hodge jumped onto her lap, kneading until she relented and stroked him. "You're the only male in this village who doesn't lie," she told him. He purred, which she took as confirmation. Agatha exhaled smoke and watched the curls vanish. The investigation was only just beginning, and already reputations were crumbling like scones left too long on the rack. Somewhere among these genteel villagers lurked a hypocrite with a typewriter and a sense of theatre. She stubbed out the cigarette. "Fine," she said to the quiet kitchen. "Let's see who blinks first." Hodge stretched luxuriously, unimpressed by human folly, and the rain resumed its steady applause. Evesham glittered damply under a pale noon sun, the kind that pretends to be cheerful while your shoes squelch. Agatha Raisin disliked Evesham at the best of times. Too many people she knew by sight but not by liking, yet she adored its cafes, where she could eavesdrop without guilt. Today she had Charles Fraith in tow, which meant she could also order wine at lunchtime without moral comment. They chose a small bistro that fancied itself French, though the chips gave it away. Charles, immaculate in tweed and idleness, looked around with faint amusement. "You realize," he said, that half the village already thinks you wrote those diary extracts yourself. Agatha sniffed. Only the half with functioning imagination. She unfolded her napkin with unnecessary precision. Anyway, I prefer the false virtue affair. Sounds like a proper scandal, doesn't it? It sounds, Charles said mildly, like you're enjoying this rather more than you ought. Enjoying it? Agatha's eyes gleamed. Charles, I'm performing a public service. If someone's spreading lies about Mrs. Bloxby, it's my duty to expose them. And if they're telling the truth, then I'll expose them anyway, for bad manners. Their waiter arrived with an air of despair that only long exposure to the English middle class can create. Charles ordered pâté. Agatha demanded shepherd's pie and a large glass of house red. Once fortified, she leaned forward conspiratorially. Bill Wong says the typed extracts were done on a Remington No. 5. Very old. Apparently the parish office and the school both have one. Charles raised an eyebrow. My dear, this is Carsely, not MI6. Everyone over 50 probably owns a typewriter in the shed. Still, said Agatha undeterred, it narrows the field. The vicarage, the church office, the school. 3 nests of righteousness, one must hide a sinner. Or a bored secretary, he murmured. Agatha ignored him, lighting a cigarette despite the waiter's wince. You've no sense of drama, Charles. A woman's reputation is at stake. So's your lunch permit. They'll throw you out if you keep smoking. She blew smoke toward him. Let them try. They ate amid murmured scandal. Agatha talked. Charles listened with the patience of a man used to weathering storms. When she had run out of suspects and adjectives, he dabbed his mouth and said, So, what's your next move, Sherlock? Information, she said promptly. The school secretary, Miss Peabody, knows every whisper that passes through the parish. I'll interview her. Interview? His eyes twinkled. As what? A journalist. Freelance. Human interest piece for the Evesham Echo. Charles laughed softly. Just promise me you won't wear that scarf. It frightens livestock. You're impossible. True, he said, smiling, and paid the bill before she could protest. Try not to be arrested. I'm shooting next week. Bail would be inconvenient. Carsely School stood at the edge of the green, prim and suspicious of strangers. Agatha marched in with the confidence of one who believes authority bows to leopard print. She found Miss Peabody in a narrow office that smelled of disinfectant and defeat. Good afternoon, Agatha began brightly. I'm writing a small piece on community life. Name's Raisin. Perhaps you've heard of me. Oh, yes, said Miss Peabody. Frequently. Splendid. Now then, I wondered if you might tell me whether the school still uses a typewriter. A typewriter? Remington. Possibly vintage. Very romantic. Very local. Miss Peabody pursed her lips. We have one, yes. Mr. Tranter borrowed it last week to type the Sunday school roster. Is that interesting enough for your paper? Agatha's pulse gave a jump. Mr. Tranter, the curate? Indeed. Said his own machine was on the blink. I do hope you're not implying mischief, Mrs. Raisin. Heaven forbid, said Agatha, who was implying exactly that. Just background colour. At that moment, the door opened and Bill Wong stepped in, wearing the look of a man resigned to fate. Afternoon, ladies. Agatha, what are you doing here? Miss Peabody's eyebrows shot up. Detective Sergeant Wong, is this an official inquiry? Not remotely, Bill said. Mrs. Raisin is merely exercising her journalistic imagination again. Agatha flushed. Excuse me, I'm conducting legitimate research. Into typewriters? Into truth, Bill sighed. Come on, Agatha, before you cause a panic about stationery theft. Really, Bill, she snapped as he steered her toward the corridor. You have no respect for investigative work. No, he said. I have great respect for oxygen, which I'm trying to preserve by removing you from this building. Her cheeks burned all the way to the car park. Villagers passing by smiled with the tolerant amusement one reserves for familiar troublemakers. Agatha climbed into her hatchback and glared at Bill through the rain-streaked window until he laughed and drove off. Public humiliation, she muttered, lighting a cigarette. My speciality. Later, when she returned to Carsely, the village looked deceptively peaceful again. Clouds had cleared, revealing a washed blue sky, but tension still clung to the hedgerows like mist. Agatha parked outside the Red Lion, intending fortification before dinner. Charles was already there, of course, lounging in the corner with his pint. Well, he asked, did your journalistic career flourish? It would have, she said, if Bill hadn't turned up like divine retribution. He laughed. Ah, the eternal triangle, you, Bill, and chaos. Spare me the wit, said Agatha. I did learn something. The curate borrowed the school typewriter. Charles looked thoughtful. That does rather tighten the circle. Exactly. Now all we need is proof he used it to forge those extracts. Or, said Charles mildly, that he used it to type his sermon. You do remember he has a job? Agatha ignored him. Her mood lightened as the gin arrived. For a moment she almost enjoyed the absurdity of it all. The stolen diary, the anonymous notes, the whispering villagers. Carsely ran on gossip the way London ran on caffeine. They were still debating motives when the church bells began to toll the hour. Agatha glanced out the window and froze. Across the green, behind the lich gate, two figures stood in sharp relief against the fading light, Mrs. Bloxby and Lily Tranter. They were talking in low, urgent tones. Then Lily lifted a hand as if to plead, and Mrs. Bloxby turned away, face pale in the dusk. "Charles," said Agatha quietly, "look." He followed her gaze. "Oh dear, that doesn't look like a hymn rehearsal." Agatha drained her glass. "Come on." "Agatha," he warned, "don't." But she was already outside, the evening chill wrapping around her like disapproval. By the time she reached the church path, the women had separated, Lily hurrying toward the vicarage, Mrs. Bloxby walking slowly, head bowed. Agatha hesitated, torn between sympathy and curiosity. She chose curiosity. "Mrs. Bloxby," she called. The vicar's wife turned, managing a small, weary smile. "Oh, Agatha, I didn't see you." "Everything all right?" "Perfectly. Just parish matters." "You looked upset." Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. "It's nothing. Please don't worry." Which, of course, guaranteed that Agatha would worry incessantly. Night settled with an edge of wind. Agatha lit her fire, poured another gin, and told Hodge all about it. He listened with the tolerant expression of one who has heard this story before. "It fits, don't you see?" she said. "Lily Tranter, the glove, the typewriter, the tears, it's all connected." Hodge stretched, yawned, and turned his back. "Ungrateful beast," she said fondly. "When I'm famous, you'll get your own food column." At 10 o'clock she finally turned off the lights and went upstairs, still composing triumphal headlines in her head. "Local woman exposes sin in the sanctuary." She was halfway through removing her makeup when the crash came. Glass shattered downstairs. Hodge yowled. Agatha grabbed her dressing gown and hurried to the sitting room. Cold air poured through a hole where the window pane had been. Among the shards lay a small stone wrapped in paper. Her hands shook slightly as she unrolled it. Typed letters, familiar now in their old-fashioned neatness, stared up at her. "Stop digging, or more sins will surface." For a moment she simply stood there, heart hammering. Then she reached for the telephone, thought better of it, and instead poured herself another gin. Hodge crept from under the sofa, tail puffed like a bottle brush. "Well," she said, forcing calm, "at least they've confirmed I'm on the right trail." He gave a doubtful meow. "Oh, hush," said Agatha. "You're safer than I am. No one blackmails cats. They already know all the sins." She swept the glass into the bin, taped cardboard over the gap, and sat down heavily. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering leaves along the lane. Carsely slept, snug and hypocritical. Somewhere a typewriter waited, keys ready to accuse. Agatha lit a cigarette and watched the smoke coil upward. "False virtue," she murmured. "Let's see whose it really is." Hodge leapt onto the armchair beside her, curling into a small warm ball. She stroked his fur absently, half comforted, half defiant. "If they think a little vandalism will stop me," she told the darkness, "they've clearly never met Agatha Raisin." The clock ticked on, calm and domestic, while her reflection in the window stared back, determined, middle-aged, and faintly ridiculous. It was, she decided, the perfect disguise for a sleuth. Carsely woke to one of those pale, washed mornings when the clouds seemed to be sulking rather than raining. The village looked innocent enough, honeystone cottages, hedgerows glistening, but Agatha Raisin, staring blearily into her first cup of coffee, had no illusions about innocence. Somewhere in this picture postcard landscape a coward had hurled a stone through her window. The note still lay on the kitchen table beside the gin bottle. "Stop digging, or more sins will surface." She studied it over the rim of her mug. The paper was smooth, expensive, the type the same old Remington print that haunted the other messages. If she hadn't been so furious, she might have felt flattered. Anonymous threats were practically a Medal of Honor in Carsely. Hodge stretched across the counter, batting at the note with one paw. "Yes," Agatha said, "that's exactly what I thought. Vermin." The phone rang. She snatched it up, half expecting another warning. "Agatha, it's Bill. I'm coming over." "Why? To admire the new ventilation in my sitting room? Because someone attacked your house. That makes it police business." "Oh, don't be dramatic. It was only a stone. I've had worse from the Women's Institute bake-off." "Be ready in 10 minutes, he said, and hung up. Bill arrived in a sensible coat, bringing damp footprints and common sense. He examined the window, the note, and the collection of cigarette ends on the hearth. "You should have rung me last night. I was busy investigating." "By drinking gin?" "By thinking," she snapped. "Gin assists the process." He sighed. "Agatha, this is turning serious. Whoever's behind these diary extracts doesn't like interference." "That's because I'm close to something," she said with satisfaction. "You're close to trouble. Let us handle it." "Oh no, you'll lock the file in a drawer and call it a parish prank. I know how you people work." Before he could reply, the doorbell rang again. Roy Silver swept in like a perfume advert. Leather coat, sunglasses, and a suitcase large enough for exile. "Aggie, darling, I came the moment I heard. Your front page tragic." Bill groaned. Not him. Roy dropped his luggage directly onto Bill's shoe. "You must be Detective Lovely. I've heard so much about you, mostly size." "Detective Sergeant," said Bill. "Of course you are." Roy turned to Agatha. "Now where's this shattered window? I'll do an interview pose beside it." "Roy," said Agatha, lighting a cigarette, "you are not doing anything beside my window except paying for the glass." He ignored her and surveyed the room. "This cottage is so Carsely chic. Vandalism adds authenticity." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'll file an incident report, but if there's another threat, you ring me immediately. Understood?" "Perfectly," said Agatha, which in her vocabulary meant never. When he'd gone, Roy flopped onto the sofa. "Right, what's the scandal? I need context for my moral support." Agatha poured him coffee, which he eyed suspiciously. "The diary's still missing. Mrs. Bloxby refuses police help. Someone's sending me warnings, and I intend to find out who." "Delicious," he said. "Maybe it's all about money. There's always money, or sex, but probably money. It travels better." "Money?" "Of course. Maybe the diary mentions a financial indiscretion. Vicars always have dodgy roof repair funds. Or perhaps our saintly Mrs. Bloxby wrote about one." Agatha frowned. She remembered an old rumour, half forgotten. Church funds once misplaced, a quiet repayment later, no questions asked. "You might be onto something for once, Roy." "Naturally," he said, stretching. "Now, where's my room?" "You're not staying here." "Too late, darling. London was exhausting. I need rural serenity, preferably with gossip." By evening, the cottage looked as though Selfridge's had exploded. Roy's designer shirts draped over chairs, his toiletry bag colonized the bathroom. Hodge sat on the windowsill glaring as if weighing the intruder for disembowelment. Agatha cooked, if one could call it that, spaghetti and opened another bottle of gin. Roy prattled happily about branding opportunities for her detective career. Imagine a little column, Agatha Raisin investigates, confessions from the Cotswolds. You'd be adored. "I'm already adored," she said tartly, "by the right people and feared by the rest." "Then let's monetize it." Before she could retort, the phone rang again. It was Charles. "Evening, my dear. Heard about your window. Fancy a bit of breaking and entering to cheer you up?" "Don't tempt me." "I'm serious. The vicarage garden. You said the diary might be hidden there. I've a torch and a low threshold for boredom." Agatha glanced at Roy, now powdering his nose in the hallway mirror. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. The night smelled of damp earth and sin. Clouds scudded across a weak moon. Puddles glimmered on the lane. Charles waited by the gate in his ancient Barber, looking far too cheerful for burglary. "You're late," he said. "I had to ditch Roy. He thinks torches are bad lighting. Now hush." They crept into the vicarage garden, shoes squelching. The compost heap loomed ahead, a dark, steaming mound. "There's symbolism in this," murmured Charles. "Keep digging and you'll find it," said Agatha, thrusting a trowel into his hand. He laughed softly. You do realize this is technically trespass. Technically, yes. Morally, civic duty. They began to dig, muttering and slipping. The smell was ghastly. Ugh, something's decomposing. Compost usually is, said Charles. Oh, look, a cabbage leaf with your complexion. Just dig, you idle aristocrat. After 10 minutes, they had unearthed nothing but potato peelings and their mutual resentment. Agatha straightened, muddy and cross. Whoever hid that diary didn't choose compost. Perhaps they had more taste. She aimed a clod at him. He dodged, laughing. Honestly, Aggie, you're magnificent when enraged. Stop flirting and look over there, she hissed. A faint rustle came from the lane beyond the hedge. Someone was watching. Probably a fox, he whispered. A fox with a torch. Indeed, a pale beam flickered once, then vanished. Agatha's heart thumped. Come on, we're leaving. They slipped back through the gate. The lane was empty, but the uneasy feeling lingered. She could smell cigarette smoke, cheap, not hers. Charles saw her shiver and placed a hand on her arm. Time for bed, detective. You go, she said. I'll lock up. Promise me you'll stay out of gardens tonight. Only if you stay out of trouble. Impossible, he said with a grin, and drove off into the mist. Inside the cottage, Roy was waiting up in silk pyjamas, face shiny with night cream. You've been prowling, he accused. I heard your car. I was gathering evidence, she said, peeling off her coat. Darling, evidence ruins the complexion. Come to bed before someone else throws masonry at us. She ignored him, wiping mud from her hands. The faint scent of that stranger's cigarette still clung to her coat. She couldn't shake the sense of eyes following her through the hedge. Roy, she said slowly, did anyone phone while I was out? Just a hang-up, twice. Her eyes met his. Twice? He nodded. I told them to leave a message. They didn't. Agatha exhaled a stream of smoke. Good. Means we're rattling them. It means, said Roy, yawning, I'll never sleep again. You'll sleep when we've solved it. Then I'll buy stronger eye cream. The next morning dawned startlingly clear, as if the storm had washed the colour back into Carsely. Agatha, nursing her third coffee, read the headlines in the Evesham Echo, nothing about her window, thankfully, and tried to ignore Roy singing in the bath. Hodge perched on the windowsill, ears twitching at the sound of church bells drifting from across the green. She was just considering a second cigarette when the phone rang again. Bill's voice was tight. Agatha, you'd better get dressed and stay put. Why? What's happened? Lily Tranter's been found in the churchyard. Unconscious. Agatha froze. Good heavens, how? Looks like she fell, but there's a bruise on her head. She's alive, taken to hospital. We don't know more yet. The churchyard, Agatha repeated slowly. Only last night she'd prowled there herself. A shiver ran down her spine. Bill, she said, this wasn't random. We'll see. And Agatha, stay out of it. Of course, she said sweetly, which meant she'd be there within the hour. She hung up and looked at Hodge. The cat blinked, unimpressed. Don't give me that look, she told him. If someone's attacking people near the vicarage, I need to know why. Besides, Bill told me to stay out, not stay away. Subtle difference. Hodge yawned elaborately. Agatha poured a small gin into her coffee mug, medicinal purposes, and stood by the window watching the sunlight creep over the green. Somewhere beyond the church walls, the quiet village she'd tried to call home was shifting again, revealing another crack in its halo. She squared her shoulders. All right, Carsely, she muttered. Show me your sins. The clock chimed 10. Roy appeared, immaculate once more, holding a hairdryer. Morning, darling. Why the grim face? Because, she said, lighting a cigarette, someone tried to kill the curate's wife. Oh, said Roy, I'll need stronger coffee and possibly a new outfit. Agatha gave a dry laugh. Yes, wear something suitable for moral collapse. Outside, the bells continued their innocent peal, as though nothing had changed. Hodge leapt down from the sill and began to wash his paws with grave concentration, the very picture of composure Agatha could never quite manage. The following morning broke with a guilty kind of sunshine, bright but reluctant. Carsely looked freshly laundered after the previous day's rain, the churchyard grass still sparkling with damp. Agatha Raisin stood at her window, coffee in one hand, cigarette in the other, watching the calm with open suspicion. She had learnt by now that tranquillity in Carsely was never to be trusted. Hodge, sprawled along the sill, flicked his tail as if to agree. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a police radio crackled faintly. The village was whispering louder than usual. Bill Wong arrived before she'd even put on lipstick. "Lily Tranter's conscious," he said without preamble. "Claims she slipped." Agatha snorted. "And I'm the Queen Mother. Where did she slip? On the truth?" "On the churchyard path. Cracked her head. Lucky she was found quickly." "How touching. Did she also happen to write herself threatening letters quoting the Bible?" Bill blinked. "You heard about those?" "Mrs. Jessop's daughter was on the phone before breakfast. She said half the parish knows. Woe unto hypocrites, wasn't it? Rather theatrical." They were delivered through the vicarage letterbox. Typed, "Same old Remington. We're checking fingerprints." "Good luck with that. Half the village has handled that thing." He looked at her with weary affection. "Just stay out of it, Agatha." "You said that last time, and I'm still breathing, aren't I?" "Barely," he muttered, and left before she could throw something. By midday she could no longer bear waiting. She marched to the Red Lion, where gossip was served hotter than soup. Inside, the usual suspects had gathered. Mabel Swithins, Doris Simpson, and the indefatigable Frida Pettigrew, all pretending to drink tea. Agatha ordered a gin. "Such a pity about poor Lily," sighed Mabel. "But honestly, that woman's always been high-strung. I blame those dreadful letters." "You've read them?" asked Agatha casually. "Heavens no," said Frida, eyes gleaming. "But Doris says—" "I said nothing," Doris protested, "except that they quoted scripture, and whoever wrote them knew their Bible." Agatha stirred her gin thoughtfully. "The devil knows scripture too." That earned a ripple of uneasy laughter. She left soon after, the gin warming her veins and sharpening her mind. Everyone was talking, no one was thinking. That, she decided, was her department. Charles Fraith appeared later, uninvited as usual, parking his vintage convertible outside with a flourish. He breezed into her kitchen, bringing cold air and entitlement. "You're supposed to knock," she said. "I did," he replied, "twice with style. You were glaring at your kettle." "Contemplating murder," she said. "Want tea?" "If you promise not to poison it." They sat at the table, Hodge between them like a furry referee. "So," said Charles, "our curate's wife survives her brush with mortality. Any theories?" "Dozens," said Agatha. "All unsatisfactory. Bill's being secretive, which usually means the case is interesting." Charles leaned back. "Perhaps the diary thief panicked. A woman found unconscious is rather dramatic, don't you think?" "Dramatic or deliberate," said Agatha. "Someone's using that diary to blackmail villagers. It's like a moral soap opera." "And who profits from such entertainment?" She thought of Mrs. Bloxby, the calm smile, the gentle evasions. No, impossible. And yet, Charles watched her face. "You're thinking the unthinkable." "I'm thinking, logically," she said. "Mrs. Bloxby wrote the diary. She admits it contained reflections. Now extracts appear, typed. Someone close to her must have copied them. Or she's releasing them herself," Agatha glared. "Don't be absurd. People do odd things out of guilt. She's incapable of deceit." "Everyone is capable," he said softly, "especially the kindest souls." That silenced her. The kettle hissed between them like a referee ending a round. Later that afternoon, Bill phoned again. "Can you keep your curiosity leashed for 5 minutes?" "Doubtful," said Agatha. "Why?" "I've found something you'll love. Years ago the vicar covered up a small embezzlement. Parish funds, 100 quid or so. The culprit repaid it, no police. Guess who persuaded him to keep it quiet?" "Mrs. Bloxby," Agatha said slowly. "Right. Her diary apparently mentions helping a soul too much. Ring any bells?" "More like alarm bells," she said. "Who was the embezzler?" "Can't tell you. Old case. Let it lie." "Oh, Bill," she sighed. "You know I never let anything lie." He groaned. "Promise me you'll tread lightly." "I'll tread elegantly." She hung up, lit a cigarette and stared at the curling smoke. Helping a soul too much. Mrs. Bloxby's phrase returned like a ghost at tea time. Had her compassion made her vulnerable or complicit? Roy Silver phoned next, his voice bouncing down the line like confetti. "Aggie, darling, I've just heard. The curate's wife attacked. You're living the storyline of the year." "It's not a soap, Roy." "Everything's a soap if you have the lighting. Now listen, I've been thinking. If someone's blackmailing people with those diary bits, we can trace who benefits. Who's suddenly flush with cash?" "Roy, You're talking about the Cotswolds, not Cannes. Money leaves clues, even when it's small village money. Check the post office savings book, darling. You're ridiculous, and write more often than you admit. Kiss. He hung up before she could retort. She hated when he made sense. That evening, Agatha walked to the vicarage under a bruised purple sky. She needed to see Mrs. Bloxby, not as a suspect, she told herself, but as a friend. The vicarage garden smelled of damp roses and disappointment. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door herself, pale but composed. "Agatha, you've heard about Lily, I suppose?" "Everyone has. How are you holding up?" "I'm trying to keep faith. Come in." The sitting room looked as always, tidy, floral, faintly smelling of polish and sermons. Agatha sat while Mrs. Bloxby poured tea with trembling hands. "You shouldn't be protecting whoever's behind this," said Agatha bluntly. Mrs. Bloxby looked startled. "Protecting? Bill says you begged him not to make it official. Why?" "Because gossip destroys quicker than truth," she said quietly. "If this spreads, good people will be ruined for old mistakes." "Good people." Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. "Once, years ago, a member of our congregation took something that wasn't theirs. The vicar and I chose mercy. Perhaps too much mercy. And now someone's using that mercy as a weapon." "It appears so." Agatha leaned forward. "Then tell me who it was. Let me help." "I can't. It would betray a confidence." Agatha's temper flared. "So you'll protect a thief, but not yourself?" Mrs. Bloxby's eyes were calm, sad. "We all protect the wrong people sometimes, Agatha." The words stung more than they should. She left soon after, feeling both guilty and infuriated, a combination that always made her smoke too much. At home, Charles was waiting in her kitchen, polishing an apple as though it were a clue. "How did it go?" "Infuriatingly civilized," she said. "She refuses to name names, says she's protecting someone." "And you think it's connected to the diary?" "I know it is. She's hiding something, someone she once helped, perhaps that embezzler, or perhaps herself." "You really think she'd write a diary confessing that?" Agatha poured a gin. "People confess to paper because it doesn't interrupt." "True," he said mildly, "though it sometimes leaks." "Not helping. Merely observing. You admire her virtue, but perhaps she admires your meddling, opposites in a tragic friendship." She glared. "You sound like a paperback blurb." "And yet, there's truth. She was protecting someone who didn't deserve it. You said so yourself." Agatha stubbed out her cigarette too hard. "If you're implying—" "I'm not implying. I'm warning. Don't let loyalty blind you." He kissed her cheek lightly and left before she could respond. Typical Charles. Drop a philosophical grenade and stroll away whistling. The evening grew still. Roy had gone back to London in search of an audience. Charles vanished into his estate. Bill buried himself in reports. Agatha sat alone with Hodge, the cottage wrapped in a hush that wasn't peace. She tried reading, but found herself staring at the page, helping a soul too much. The phrase looped in her head like an unfinished tune. She thought of Mrs. Bloxby's kind eyes, of the way she deflected questions. Could compassion really make someone reckless? And worse, had Agatha's own prying made it all unravel? The rattle of the letterbox broke the silence. Hodge leapt down, fur bristling. Agatha crossed to the door. Another envelope lay on the mat. Cream paper, neat type, that same Remington print. Her stomach tightened. She carried it to the table, tore it open. There is a woman of vanity among us, whose meddling ruins lives and stirs the dust of sin, from the diary of a hypocrite. Agatha read it twice, the words burning hotter each time. A vain woman, meddling. It was meant for her, about her. But who had written it? And worse, whose voice was she hearing beneath the cold type? She imagined Mrs. Bloxby at her desk, pen trembling, writing something meant as self-discipline, never for eyes beyond her own, until now. Could her friend's diary truly contain that accusation, or had someone twisted her words to wound? "Vanity indeed," Agatha muttered, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "At least I'm honest about mine." Hodge leapt onto her lap, purring despite the smoke. She stroked his fur, trying to steady herself. The clock ticked on. Outside, the moon rose over the church spire, serene as if nothing had changed. Agatha knew better. Someone in Carsely was turning virtue into vice, kindness into leverage, and now her own name was written in the script of sin. She took a long drag, exhaled toward the ceiling, and said softly, "All right then. If I'm the meddler, I might as well earn the title." Hodge stretched, unconcerned. The cigarette tip glowed briefly in the dark, a small, stubborn flame, like Agatha herself, refusing to go out before its time. Carsely was suffering from one of those drab afternoons that couldn't decide whether to drizzle or sulk. The clouds hung low, muttering to themselves over the church spire, and the only lively sound came from Agatha Raisin's kitchen, where tempers were brewing faster than the tea. Roy had swept back from London that morning, claiming the city was emotionally overbooked, and Carsely needed him more. Agatha stood at the cooker, cigarette in one hand, gin in the other, glaring at the assembled company. Her so-called emergency strategy meeting had gathered Bill Wong, Charles Fraith and Roy Silver around her small kitchen table, which was already buried under toast crumbs, half-drunk glasses, and the ruins of an experiment in cheese sandwiches. "If Fritz Brenner ever saw this," Charles remarked lazily, "he'd have a coronary." "Fritz," said Roy, perplexed. "Wolf's Chef," Agatha snapped. "Fictional and foreign, neither of which help us find a blackmailer." "Darling," said Roy, flapping a napkin, "I'm just grateful we're having gin instead of herbal tea. I can't face strategy without alcohol." Bill looked as if he rather wished he were fictional. "Remind me again why I'm here, Agatha. You know I can't share police evidence." "You're here because you're the only sane person in the village, and I need ballast." "Translation," Charles murmured. "Someone to stop you arresting the vicar." "Don't tempt me," said Agatha. "Now listen, whoever stole Mrs. Bloxby's diary isn't after money, at least not yet. They want humiliation, and I think I know why." Roy leaned forward eagerly. "Because humiliation is fabulous for ratings." "Because," she continued, ignoring him, "the diary isn't full of sins, it's full of compassion. Whoever's leaking extracts wants to twist her kindness into guilt. Classic small village psychology. Make virtue look suspicious." Charles reached for another slice of toast. "You've been reading Freud again, haven't you?" "No," said Agatha, lighting another cigarette. "I've been reading Faces, Lily Tranter's especially. She looked ready to confess something before she nearly got herself killed." Bill sighed. "She already did. This morning. Privately." Three heads turned. "Spit it out," said Agatha. "She admitted stealing a small amount from the church fund years ago. Her husband was in trouble, gambling debts. Mrs. Bloxby persuaded the vicar to cover it quietly. Lily repaid it long ago." Agatha froze, cigarette mid-air. "So it's true. That's what the diary meant by helping a soul too much." "Probably. But the amount was trivial, the intention kind. Still, if someone's using that story for blackmail—" "They're filth," said Agatha flatly, "and I intend to scrub them out." Roy clasped his hands dramatically. "Operation Clean Conscience." "Operation Mind Your Own Business," muttered Charles. Agatha ignored them both. "Right, let's analyse. Who had access to the parish office?" "Half of Carsely," said Bill. "It's where they keep raffle tickets and confession rotas." "Then start with the other half," said Agatha briskly. "The ones who wanted to get in." Roy sipped his gin with the solemnity of a bishop. "Darling, this is marvellous, like Poirot, only louder." "Louder gets results," said Agatha. "Now, Bill, what about the typewriter? Still the same Remington?" "Yes, and now we know where it came from. Parish office. The ink's distinctive, violet ribbon, old model. We found some on the desk blotter." "There you are," cried Roy, thumping the table. "Case closed. Arrest the church." "Not yet," said Bill. "No prints, no witnesses, no proof the typewriter wasn't borrowed again. And I'm not supposed to be discussing any of this." "Too late," said Charles amiably. "We're honorary constables now. Shall we have badges?" "You'll have bruises," said Agatha, refilling her glass. "I'm going to the vicarage. If Mrs. Bloxby's been hiding the truth, I want it from her mouth, not gossip." "Aggie, wait," Roy protested. "At least put on something less confrontational than tweed. You look like a moral crusader." "Perfect," said Agatha, snatching her coat. "That's exactly what I am." The walk to the vicarage took 10 damp minutes. The drizzle had committed itself by now, fine as silk and twice as irritating. Carsely lay quiet under it, curtains twitching, puddles reflecting the church spire. Agatha marched through the gate without knocking. Mrs. Bloxby met her in the hall, calm as ever, though her eyes looked shadowed. "Agatha," she said softly. "I wondered when you'd come." "Then you know why I'm here," said Agatha. "You should have told me, Mrs. Bloxby, about Lily, about the money. Please, come in." The sitting room smelled of polish and moral restraint. A clock ticked piously on the mantelpiece. "It wasn't my secret to tell," said Mrs. Bloxby, folding her hands. "Lily was desperate. Her husband had borrowed from the wrong people. I persuaded the vicar to advance a small sum from the discretionary fund. It was repaid within months. No harm was done, except to her peace of mind." Agatha paced before the hearth. "And you wrote about it in your diary?" "Yes, I wrote about my guilt, about whether I'd helped her for her sake, or for my own pride in forgiving. And now someone's using that to make you look corrupt." Mrs. Bloxby's smile was sad. "Perhaps I am, in a small way. Pride often hides beneath kindness. You know that, Agatha." The remark stung more than it should. Agatha turned away, pretending to study a framed parish photograph. "You're too saintly for this world, and saints make excellent targets." "I've never been a saint, only a woman who tries and fails quietly." "Well, you won't fail this time," said Agatha briskly. "Not while I'm here." Mrs. Bloxby's eyes warmed. "That's very kind." "It's not kindness. It's principle." "Then thank you for your principles," she said gently. "Do be careful with them. They can be sharp." Agatha left before her throat betrayed her. Back at the cottage, the so-called strategy meeting had devolved into what Roy described as group reflection and Charles called laziness. Gin bottles and toast crusts littered the table like archaeological evidence of folly. "Did she confess?" asked Roy, bright-eyed. "She explained," said Agatha, hanging up her coat. "She helped Lily cover the theft. No money missing now, but whoever stole that diary is twisting it into something sordid." "How frightfully biblical," murmured Charles, "casting the first stone and all that." "Stones again," said Roy, glancing nervously at the window. "Let's not tempt fate." Agatha ignored them, lighting a cigarette. "We need to trace that typewriter ink." "Violet," Bill said. "There can't be many ribbons that shade still in use." "The parish office keeps one," said Bill. "Ordered from some stationery supplier in Evesham. Why?" "Because," said Roy suddenly, leaning across the table, "there's violet ink on this." He snatched up one of the anonymous letters from Agatha's corkboard. Near the edge, half hidden beneath a crease, was indeed a faint smudge, purplish, uneven. "Probably a fingerprint," said Bill, taking it carefully. "Or an accident." "Accidents," said Agatha, "rarely leave violet fingerprints." Charles looked amused. "So our villain writes threatening letters and refills the parish typewriter with purple ribbons. A touch of vanity, perhaps." "Or carelessness," said Agatha. "Either way, we'll find them." "Before or after the next glass?" asked Charles. "During," said Agatha. Roy raised his glass. "To the Gin and Guilt Club." "To catching blackmailers," said Agatha. "To staying out of prison," added Bill gloomily. They drank, and for a brief, ridiculous moment the room felt almost cheerful. Outside, the rain thickened, drumming on the window as if applauding their incompetence. Later, when the others had gone, Agatha tidied half-heartedly. Hodge prowled the crumbs with offended dignity. She bent to stroke him, muttering, "You're the only man in this house who cleans up after himself." He yawned pointedly. Her thoughts drifted back to Mrs. Bloxby. How calm she'd been, even while confessing to moral folly. Agatha envied that composure. Hers cracked like cheap china whenever pride or loneliness pressed too hard. Perhaps Mrs. Bloxby's gentleness wasn't weakness at all, but armour of another kind. She poured herself one last gin, stared at the violet-stained letter on the table, and felt the stirrings of something she hated admitting. Doubt. What if Mrs. Bloxby wasn't just protecting Lily? What if she was protecting someone else entirely? "Don't start moralising," she told herself aloud. "Leave that to the clergy." Still, she couldn't shake the unease. The diary's thief hadn't finished. Not yet. And somewhere, behind all the gossip and rain, someone in Carsely was smiling at her frustration. Hodge leapt onto the table, pawing at the edge of the letter. A tiny smear of violet came off on his fur. "Careful, darling," she murmured, brushing it away. "That colour doesn't suit you." He purred, curling into her lap as if to remind her that, for all the sins of the parish, life could still offer comfort, warm, ordinary, and wordless. Agatha took a slow sip of gin, listening to the rain and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. The so-called gin and guilt club had achieved nothing except hangovers, yet she felt oddly satisfied. Perhaps tomorrow would bring clarity, or at least better gossip. She stubbed out her cigarette, watching the curl of smoke twist upward like a question mark. "Violet ink," she murmured. "Who'd have thought piety came in colour?" Hodge stretched and settled again, tail flicking once. Agatha smiled faintly. Whatever tomorrow brought, truth, scandal, or another storm, she'd face it as she always did, with a full ashtray and an unrepentant heart. Carsely lay under a pewter-coloured sky, half drowned in drizzle. The sort of rain, Agatha thought sourly, that had no conviction. It simply lingered, waiting to ruin hair and tempers. She buttoned her mac and marched along the lane toward the vicarage, determination steaming from her like breath. The anonymous letters had stopped for 2 days, which worried her more than their arrival. Silence in Carsely usually meant plotting, and Agatha Raisin, with her battered notebook and smouldering cigarette, had never been one for patience. Hodge watched from the window as she left, tail twitching in disapproval. He was used to these excursions, his mistress charging into trouble like a small fashionable tank. The church stood ahead, solemn and smug, its tower poking the clouds like a moral finger. The vicarage beside it glowed faintly through the mist. Smoke curled from the chimney, comforting, ordinary. But Agatha had learnt that evil, or at least idiocy, often wore its slippers indoors. She pushed open the side gate and followed the narrow path to the parish office. The door was ajar. A faint smell of burning drifted out, sharp and papery. Agatha's instincts flared. She slipped inside. The office was cramped. Filing cabinets, hymn books, a desk littered with correspondence. Behind it stood the vicar himself, sleeves rolled up, feeding pages into a small metal bin where flames crackled cheerfully. He looked up, startled, spectacles glinting. "Mrs. Raisin," he exclaimed. "Good heavens, you frightened me." "Not as much as you're frightening me," said Agatha. "Bonfire night early, is it?" He flushed. "Just disposing of old records, outdated rotas and committee minutes." She eyed the pile on his desk. Beside the papers sat a familiar object, an old Remington typewriter, keys dulled with use. Next to it, a small bottle of violet ink. Her pulse quickened. "Outdated, Seems a pity to destroy parish history, may I?" Mrs. Raisin. Too late. She plucked a half-burnt sheet from the bin with her tongs of curiosity. The writing was faint but legible. Reflection on mercy and temptation. Her eyes flicked up. "This looks rather like Mrs. Bloxby's diary." The vicar's mouth tightened. "Please put that down." "So it was here." He sighed, sinking into his chair. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," she said, perching on the edge of the desk as though cross-examining a suspect. "My wife is a good woman," he began slowly. "Too good. She blames herself for every sorrow in this parish. When her private reflections were stolen, the gossip nearly destroyed her. I found the diary, weeks ago, behind a cupboard in the vestry. I kept it to spare her further pain." "And decided to burn it today?" "Yes." He stared at his hands. "I thought if it no longer existed, the village might forget." Agatha stubbed her cigarette into an empty mug. Villagers never forget. They just change the subject. "Perhaps," he said wearily, "but I won't see her suffer for her kindness." Agatha's gaze drifted back to the violet ink and the Remington. "You do realize, Vicar, that these happen to match the weapon of choice for the blackmailer?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "Weapon?" "Typewriter, violet ink, anonymous letters. Ring a bell?" "I've written nothing anonymous in my life." "Of course not," said Agatha dryly, "except sermons about humility." Colour rose in his cheeks. "Mrs. Raisin, I understand you mean well, but you're meddling in matters of conscience." "And you're obstructing an investigation," she shot back. "Bill Wong will want to know about this little fire. I'll speak to Sergeant Wong myself. You'll do no such thing. He's up to his ears in bingo thefts. Leave him out of this." Before he could reply, the door opened. Mrs. Bloxby stepped in, umbrella dripping, face pale. "Agatha?" she said softly. "What on earth?" "Ask your husband," said Agatha. "He's been redecorating with smoke." Mrs. Bloxby's gaze moved from the smouldering bin to the typewriter. She set down her umbrella with a faint thud. "Henry, please tell me you haven't—" "It's for your own good, my dear," he said. "That diary has caused nothing but pain." "But to destroy it, without telling me—" Her voice trembled, and for once Agatha found herself wanting to vanish rather than witness the quiet heartbreak of people who genuinely loved each other. "He meant well," Agatha said awkwardly, "but I think we'd better discuss who really has the diary now, because apparently someone else does." Mrs. Bloxby turned to her. "Someone else?" "The blackmailer," said Agatha. "Those typed extracts, the threats, the violet ink. They're using your words to torment the village, and if your husband's not the culprit—" "He is not." "Then someone very close to the church is." The vicar drew a breath, steadying himself. "When I found the diary, it was not complete. Several pages were missing. I thought perhaps Henry Tranter had taken them. He used the office often, you see, but when Lily's accident occurred, I realized it must be something worse." "You found it weeks ago," said Agatha, "and told no one." "I believe discretion kinder than scandal." Agatha gave a short, humourless laugh. "You're all allergic to daylight in this parish. Secrets breed like mildew." "Mrs. Raisin," said Mrs. Bloxby gently, "you mustn't judge him. He acted out of love, not deceit." Agatha looked at the pair of them. He rumpled and ashamed, she calm despite the storm, and felt a twinge of humility she didn't care for. "Love's all very well," she muttered, "but it makes dreadful detectives." "Then perhaps you'd better be ours," said Mrs. Bloxby quietly. Agatha blinked. "You mean that?" "I do. I've nothing left to hide. Whoever is doing this will stop only when they're exposed." The vicar reached for her hand. She took it, and something in the simple gesture silenced Agatha's usual sarcasm. She nodded briskly instead. "Right then, I'll find the villain, but if you burn another scrap of evidence, I'll excommunicate you myself." The drizzle had become proper rain by the time she trudged back through the churchyard. Tombstones gleamed like wet teeth. Agatha paused beneath a yew lighting a cigarette and considered what she'd learnt. The vicar had hidden the diary. Mrs. Bloxby had written it, yet someone else had stolen pages afterwards. She took a drag and exhaled toward the gravestones. "You'd enjoy this, wouldn't you?" she told them. "All secrets and sin." A voice behind her drawled, "Talking to the dead again. They're less argumentative than you." Charles Fraith stood at the gate, umbrella in one hand, charm in the other. "What are you doing here?" "Bill sent me to check you hadn't offended the clergy beyond redemption." "Too late for that," she said. "Come on, you can buy me a drink." The Red Lion smelled of damp coats and stale triumph. They found a corner booth, ordered gin and sandwiches, and compared notes. "So," said Charles, "the vicar's innocent, his wife's saintly, and the diary's still missing. Not exactly progress." "It's more than you've done," she snapped. "You were supposed to check the church office for any sign of break-in." "I did. Nothing, except a few muddy footprints near the vestry door. Could be mine. Could be the culprit's. Could be divine intervention," he said cheerfully. "You really should let me investigate. I have a natural gift for moral ambiguity." "You have a natural gift for laziness." He raised his glass. "To laziness, it keeps one alive." Agatha smirked despite herself. "All right, philosopher. If you're so eager, go back tonight and search properly. And don't flirt with the ghosts." "Only if they're charming." She rolled her eyes. "And Charles, don't touch anything holy." Perish the thought. Night fell like a curtain, heavy and wet. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke. Rain lashed the windows of Agatha's cottage. Wind howled down the chimney. Hodge sat glaring at the weather, tail flicking with disapproval. Agatha poured a gin and waited for the phone to ring. She told herself she wasn't worried about Charles, merely irritated that he took so long to report back. By the third drink, she had moved from irritation to suspicion. Charles was perfectly capable of falling asleep in the vestry if it offered shelter from the elements. At last, near midnight, the phone trilled. She snatched it up. "About time." "Calm down," came his amused voice. "You'll ruin your blood pressure." "Well?" "I found something." Her heartbeat quickened. "Where?" "Behind the hymn book cupboard. A folder wrapped in brown paper. I thought it was old accounts, but... Inside were several handwritten pages, clearly your friend's diary. And something else. A note." "A note?" "Typed, naturally. Signed Lily Tranter." Agatha nearly dropped the receiver. "You're joking. She's alive." "Indeed, which makes the note's content rather theatrical. It reads like a farewell, apology, despair, talk of sin and forgiveness. Classic suicide letter. Let me see it. I'll bring it over now. But Agatha, what? It was hidden deliberately, not lost. Someone wanted it found and found by us. She froze, staring at the rain-blurred window. The lane outside gleamed like ink, and for a moment she thought she saw a shadow move beyond the hedge. Probably imagination, or a neighbour sneaking home from the pub, but it chilled her nonetheless. "Just get here," she said briskly, "and mind the puddles." Charles arrived 20 minutes later, drenched but smug, a folder tucked under his coat. Hodge inspected him as though debating whether to bite. Agatha snatched the folder, spread the contents on the kitchen table. The diary pages were unmistakably Mrs. Bloxby's handwriting, neat, introspective, dated months apart. The note, however, was typed, violet ribbon again. "I cannot live with what I've done. Forgive me, but confession brings no peace. The sin was mine alone. I will end it where it began. Lily Tranter." Agatha looked up. "And yet she's very much alive." Precisely. So either she planned her own dramatic exit and lost her nerve, or someone forged this to frame her. "Or both," said Agatha quietly. "Maybe she wrote it and someone kept it for later use." Charles nodded. "The question is, why hide it in the church, unless the culprit wanted to implicate the clergy again?" "Or me," she said grimly. "They've already called me vain and meddling. What's next? Murderous." "Let's hope not. You'd hate the paperwork." She almost smiled, then glanced again at the letter. A faint smear of violet ink marked the corner, identical to the stain on the earlier threats. "Same typewriter," she murmured. "Meaning?" "Meaning our culprit has access to the parish office, and a very warped sense of timing." The wind rattled the panes. Hodge hissed softly, fur rising. Agatha followed his gaze toward the front door. For a heartbeat she thought she heard footsteps retreating down the path. Then silence, thick and expectant. "See?" said Charles quietly. "You do attract an audience." Agatha forced a laugh. "Good, let them listen. Tomorrow I'll give them something worth hearing." She gathered the pages, slid them back into the folder, and locked it in her desk drawer. The key turned with a satisfying click. "You're keeping it?" "Until I can prove who forged it. And if Lily Tranter didn't write this, someone in Carsely is about to find their conscience poked with a very sharp umbrella." Charles grinned. "Remind me never to wrong you." "Too late," she said. "You already have by dripping on my carpet." He laughed and poured himself a gin. The storm raged outside, thunder rolling across the hills. Agatha lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the lamplight. "Vicar burning papers," she said. "Diary reappearing with a suicide note. Lily alive, and someone watching us in the dark. Remind me why I ever retired here." "For the peace and quiet," said Charles. She gave a snort. "Next time I'll move somewhere honest, like Westminster." Hodge leapt onto her lap, settling heavily. She stroked him absently, eyes on the rain-slick window. The village lay hidden, sleeping or pretending to. Tomorrow she'd visit Lily herself. And if that note was genuine, Carsely was harbouring guilt far deeper than drizzle. She took one last drag, exhaled slowly, and muttered, "The vicar had his shadow. Let's see who else does." The clock ticked. The storm softened, and Hodge's purr filled the silence, the one sound in Carsely that asked for no explanation. Carsely awoke under a bruised sky that seemed to have forgotten what colour it meant to be. A faint mist clung to the hedgerows, and the church bell tolled a single, tentative note before losing heart. Agatha Raisin, who had slept badly and dreamt worse, sat at her kitchen table nursing a cup of tea that tasted of regret and ash. Hodge eyed her reproachfully from the windowsill. He disliked early mornings, and, by association, people who caused them. Agatha flicked ash into the saucer of a long-extinguished candle. Somewhere in the village, truth was brewing like bad coffee, and she meant to drink it first. Bill Wong's call came at 7:30. "She's awake," he said. "Lily Tranter wants to see you." "About time," said Agatha. "I've been chewing on curiosity since midnight." "Don't bite too hard. She's fragile." "I'm not planning to eat her." "Good. I'll meet you at the hospital." The Evesham ward smelled of disinfectant and despair. Lily lay pale against the pillows, a faint bruise along her temple where she'd struck the churchyard wall. Her hands twisted the sheet as if wringing out guilt. Agatha, perched on a chair that squeaked moral judgment, looked her over. You've caused a fine mess, my dear. Whole village in uproar. Anonymous letters, false confessions, people lighting bonfires indoors. Honestly, it's like Macbeth without the costumes." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant it to go so far." Bill cleared his throat. "Start from the beginning. Slowly." She nodded. "It was my husband. He found Mrs. Bloxby's diary when he was helping with the church accounts. He read it, laughed at it, and said it would make the parish see who really ran things. He wanted to expose the vicar as weak, take over as churchwarden. He thought he could humiliate them both and step into respectability." Agatha's lips tightened. "And you?" "I tried to stop him. I begged him to put it back. He said I was naive, so I copied a few pages, hoping to frighten him into silence, make him think someone else knew. But once they were out, others saw them. It all spun away." "And the suicide note?" asked Bill. She looked down. "That was mine, after he left me. I couldn't bear the shame, but I changed my mind. I hid the note in the church because I couldn't destroy it, and someone found it." Agatha exhaled slowly. The pieces fitted with unpleasant precision. "So, you started the fire, and he fanned it." Lily nodded, tears spilling. "I thought if I admitted it, no one would believe me. I'm sorry. I've made everyone suffer, especially Mrs. Bloxby." For once, Agatha felt no thrill of triumph, just exhaustion and annoyingly pity. "You silly, well-meaning fool," she said gently. "You should have come to me. I'd have managed the scandal properly." Bill shot her a look. "We'll handle the husband quietly. There's enough evidence. Letters typed on his office machine, same violet ink. The curate's been involved too, supplying the gossip. He'll be transferred before he can protest." "Transferred," said Agatha. "You make it sound like sending mildew to another wall." "Exactly," said Bill. "Keeps the structure standing." Agatha almost smiled. "You're wasted in uniform." That evening, Carsely behaved as though nothing had ever happened, which was its favourite method of coping. Curtains twitched, whispers flitted, and by tea-time the WI was planning next month's bake sale, as though diaries and blackmail were ordinary domestic inconveniences. Agatha walked home through the dusk, damp hair clinging rebelliously round her face. The village smelled of wood smoke and forgiveness, temporary both of them. At her gate, Mrs. Bloxby waited, shawl drawn close. "You've spoken to Lily?" "I have," said Agatha, "and before you say anything kind, don't. She deserves a good shaking." "She's already had one, from life." They went inside. Agatha made tea, though she longed for gin. The kettle wheezed like an old gossip reluctant to retire. Mrs. Bloxby sat by the fire, hands folded. "Thank you, Agatha. I know you didn't do it for thanks." "No, I did it for curiosity, and possibly vanity." "Even so, you've done good. My husband's reputation will recover, and Lily may yet find peace." Agatha snorted. "Peace is overrated. Give me accuracy any day." Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "You see the world too sharply, but perhaps that's what keeps you from harm." "Not always. Sometimes it just keeps me awake." There was a pause, companionable in its awkwardness. Outside, rain tapped against the window. "You know," said Agatha at last, "if people wrote fewer diaries, I'd have fewer cases." "And less excitement," said Mrs. Bloxby. "Would you really want that?" Agatha considered, then shrugged. "Probably not. But next time someone confesses their sins in writing, I'm charging by the page." Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. "Even a diary can't hold all our truths." "No," said Agatha, "but it can make a fine weapon when misused." Mrs. Bloxby rose. "Then promise me one thing. Don't start keeping one yourself." "Heaven forbid," said Agatha. "I'd only edit it for publication." They shared a look that was half affection, half exasperation, and the vicar's wife took her leave, vanishing into the drizzle like moral smoke. Later that night, Charles and Roy appeared, uninvited but bearing fish and chips and gossip, the cottage filled with the cheerful scent of grease and cheap triumph. "So, you've done it again," said Roy, plopping onto the sofa. "Agatha Raisin, scourge of sin and saviour of vicars. Honestly, darling, you should start a business." "I already have," said Agatha. "It's called Surviving Carsely." Charles raised a brow. "Bill tells me you solved it through intuition." "Through persistence," she corrected, "and because no one else in this parish can keep a secret longer than 5 minutes." "Including you," said Charles. especially me. They ate in companionable disorder. Roy provided commentary as though reviewing a play. The tragic heroine, Lily, redeemed by confession. The saintly mentor, Mrs. Bloxby, restored to grace. And our leading lady, Agatha Raisin, misunderstood but magnificent. Agatha rolled her eyes. If you're fishing for another gin, pour it yourself. Already have, darling. Good, it's what you're best at. Charles leaned back, smiling. Ever thought of keeping a diary yourself, Aggie? Imagine the bestseller, Confessions of a Country Sleuth. Not unless I can edit it for publication, she said promptly. You'd leave out all the emotional bits. Exactly. They laughed. Even Hodge looked briefly entertained, though that may have been the smell of cod. When they'd gone, Agatha tidied the remains, opened the window to let in the cool, damp air, and sat for a moment in the quiet. The village was dark, save for the faint golden light spilling from the vicarage across the green. She imagined Mrs. Bloxby there, reading by lamplight, her husband nearby, the diary safely locked away, or perhaps finally burnt. Agatha wasn't sure which comforted her more, the idea of secrets preserved or secrets destroyed. She reached for her cigarette case, hesitated, then lit one anyway. The match flared briefly, defiant as her pride. Hodge jumped onto the sill, tail curling round her arm. You'd have solved it faster, she told him. All you need is a litter tray and an instinct for guilt. He blinked, unimpressed. Agatha smiled. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Somewhere a fox barked, life carrying on, unbothered by human folly. She leaned back, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. Another mystery done, another bruise to the ego patched with gin. Yet beneath the satisfaction lurked the faint ache she never admitted, that every case ended with other people mended and herself still a little cracked. Don't look at me like that, she told Hodge. I'm fine. Perfectly fine. He stretched luxuriously, the feline embodiment of disbelief. Agatha chuckled, crushed the cigarette into the ashtray, and reached for her glass. The clock struck 11, neat as a full stop. Cheers to us, old boy, she said softly. We may be vain, meddling, and insufferable, but we do get results. The cat purred, the rain faded to mist, and in the small cottage on the edge of Carsely, vanity and virtue reached their nightly truce under the faint, forgiving glow of the lamp. The Cotswolds had finally remembered how to be beautiful. The rain had retreated to its proper place in the clouds, and Carsely glowed beneath a thin wash of spring sunlight. Grass on the green had recovered from the trample of gossip, and the village now busied itself with safer matters, raffles, jam jars, and the mystery of who'd borrowed the parish teapot and failed to return it. Agatha Raisin, dressed in her favourite tweed skirt and an air of justified superiority, strolled up the lane toward the vicarage. She had decided, magnanimously, that Mrs. Bloxby should be forgiven for her part in recent events. After all, saints could be exasperating, but they were useful for contrast. Hodge padded alongside for the first few yards before deciding sunbathing suited him better. He flopped onto a warm patch of pavement, tail twitching in faint disapproval of her industry. The vicarage gate creaked as Agatha pushed it open. Inside the garden, Mrs. Bloxby knelt among the rose beds, wearing an old straw hat that made her look both domestic and dignified. The scent of soil and tea roses mingled with the faint sweetness of lawn clippings. "You'll ruin your back," called Agatha. Mrs. Bloxby glanced up, smiling. "It's already ruined from years of moral support." "Then you need a gin, not a sermon," said Agatha, setting down a small paper bag. "Scones. From that new baker in Mercester. He's a genius or a criminal. I can't decide which." "How kind of you." "Don't flatter me. They were on offer." They moved to the garden bench, the teapot between them, steam rising like polite conversation. The vicar's voice drifted faintly through the open window, practicing Sunday's sermon. Agatha rolled her eyes. "Still on about forgiveness, I suppose." "A safer topic than pride," said Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha smirked. "He'd run out of paper if he tried that one on me." For a moment they sat in companionable quiet. Bees fussed in the lavender. The vicar's lawnmower coughed into life somewhere around the corner. "So," Agatha said at last, "the diary's been safely locked away." "In the parish drawer," Mrs. Bloxby replied, "under old hymn sheets and invoices for roof repairs. It will trouble no one now." "Except perhaps the mice," said Agatha, "though I imagine they'll find the theology chewy." Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. "I've started another, you know, a new diary." Agatha gave her a suspicious look. "Good grief, woman, haven't we learnt anything?" "This one isn't for confessions. It's about forgiveness. It helps to write things down, to see where grace hides in the muddle." Agatha poured herself more tea. "I prefer facts to feelings. Feelings leak." "Facts leak too," said Mrs. Bloxby, "especially when printed in parish newsletters." That earned a reluctant smile. "Touché," said Agatha. She brushed crumbs from her lap, pretending the breeze had got in her eye. Mrs. Bloxby studied her gently. "You were very brave, you know." "Nonsense. I was annoyed, which is a better motivator." "Still, you did a kind thing." Agatha waved the compliment away. "Kindness is overrated. It leads to muddy shoes and emotional mess." "And yet you keep doing it," said Mrs. Bloxby, her tone mild as tea. Agatha stared across the garden. The roses trembled in the light wind, pink petals scattered like shy applause. "Maybe I just like tidying other people's disasters. It distracts me from my own." Mrs. Bloxby didn't answer. She simply reached for the teapot and refilled Agatha's cup, the gesture warmer than sympathy. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the colour of soft pewter. The two women wandered among the borders, discussing aphids, recipes, and the folly of modern footwear. Peace settled over Carsely like a cat curling on an old chair, temporarily content, likely to stir again. At the gate, Agatha paused. "You're sure you're all right? After everything?" "Quite sure. Lily's left for her sisters in Devon. The parish will forget in time." "It always does," said Agatha. "For about 5 minutes." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "Then we must enjoy those minutes while they last." "Speak for yourself. I'm not built for tranquility. It's bad for the complexion." They said goodbye in the polite, lingering way of English women who've survived scandal together. Mrs. Bloxby returned to her roses. Agatha walked home, feeling unreasonably lonely for someone who'd just saved an entire village from itself. Her cottage waited with the air of mild reproach. Hodge had relocated to the windowsill, snoring faintly, one paw over his nose. Agatha poured herself a gin and sat beside him, the day folding into twilight outside. Across the green, the vicarage windows glowed amber. Domestic perfection, she thought irritably. No wonder it provokes sin. She lit a cigarette, watching the smoke coil upward in lazy blue spirals. Somewhere a blackbird sang as though life were perfectly simple. Agatha envied it for precisely 3 seconds. She reached for the paper, scanning headlines about distant chaos, and found no comfort there either. The Cotswolds were safer. At least the betrayals came with tea. Her gaze drifted to the small pile of notepads on her desk. She'd bought them months ago, planning to start a journal of cases solved and lessons learnt. The first page was still blank, apart from the faint ring of a forgotten gin glass. She considered picking up a pen, then laughed aloud. What would she write? Tuesday. Solved moral crisis, avoided emotional growth. Hardly riveting. Hodge stirred, stretched, and yawned in silent commentary. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "You'd write worse." He blinked, unimpressed. Cats, she reflected, were born editors, ruthless, wordless, and convinced they knew better. Outside, the first stars began to puncture the dusk. The village lay quiet again, its secrets tucked beneath neat thatched roofs. For once, there was nothing to investigate, no one to scold, no mystery except the ordinary kind. Why human beings never quite learn. Agatha drew deeply on her cigarette and watched the smoke rise, curling toward the ceiling like a thought half admitted. She imagined Mrs. Bloxby, upstairs at the vicarage, writing neat sentences about mercy and renewal. Agatha wondered, reluctantly, what the next chapter of that diary would say about her. She smiled to herself. Best not to know. Mystery suited her better than sainthood. The clock on the mantel ticked, the cat purred, and the smoke thinned to a gentle haze. The peace of Carsely might last a week, a month if the weather held. After that, something, or someone, would stir it again. It always did. Agatha finished her drink, stubbed out the cigarette, and stood to draw the curtains. The lamplight caught her reflection in the glass, a middle-aged woman with bright eyes, untidy hair, and a grin that meant trouble wasn't far away. She raised the empty glass to herself in a small toast. "To secrets," she murmured, "and to knowing just enough." Then she turned out the light.